Hey everybody, hope you are making it today in this crazy world, a world that is in need of healing for sure. And as I think of healing, there's something that I've noticed that is really baffling to me. I was raised pretty much all my life in the Black church, and certainly all of my career up until the last couple of years has been in the Black church. And so now I find myself in this white liberal Christian space, which is a blessing because it gives me theological space that I very desperately needed. And so I so appreciate that. And it gives other people that space, right? It gives the people I serve the opportunity to connect with God in ways that are authentic for them, and to engage in the kind of practices that are really meaningful and healing for them. And so, as I'm exposed to kind of like white liberal Christianity, a lot of times people will tell me about some of these practices that they're engaging in, and they're so excited about them, right? And as I listen to it, I find myself really underwhelmed because everything that they're telling me about, all these new and exciting things that they're telling me about, is stuff that I already know about through the Black spiritual tradition, right? So you got chanting. The mothers moan their laments in church services. They would take one refrain of a song and sing it over and over until the atmosphere shift, and they had what they needed to be able to make it to whatever they were facing when they left that church house. Energy work, right? I already talked about that the shifting of the atmosphere and how we know how to do it. We practice it and we know how to do it. And we've been laying on hands. If that ain't energy work, I don't know what is. And so I'm underwhelmed, and sometimes, actually a lot of times, it actually turns into frustration and sometimes anger, because I'm like, all that stuff, like, I already got it. But what happened was I spent tens of thousands of dollars going to seminary for them to completely disembody theology for me, right? Then only to get out and find out that there are white Christians now that are trying to do embodied theology using practices from other cultures, which is interesting, not necessarily Black culture, which is the one that seems the most accessible, right? But they're doing it, they're rediscovering kind of what I like to call Christopher Columbusing this stuff, right? That the very same institutions that they run tried to get me to dismiss. And it bothers me, y'all. Like, it really angers me sometimes. And one day I was just in my house and I got so mad about it that nobody was there with me, but I just said out loud, I don't need anybody to teach me. And what was just started out as one kind of statement of defiance continued into kind of a mantra. I said, I don't need anybody to teach me. My ancestors taught me. All right, I recognize that there were people in my life who steeped me in this tradition, that taught me how to tap into the divine, right? To access God and to get what I needed to be able to make it through what I had to face in life. But then I thought about it and I said, well, that's only a few people that I had access to. And then I said, and my friends hold the wisdom of their ancestors. I don't need anyone to teach me. My ancestors taught me, and my friends hold the wisdom of their ancestors. That thing is blessing me right now when I'm thinking about it. But all I'm trying to say is that, listen, we got to be able to value what we already have, right? Understand the great worth. Understand that we have what it takes within us to be able to heal ourselves from the trauma that God knows we have been bombarded with, what we're still going through. And we have already within our community the ability to transform our community. And we need it because nobody's coming to save us. And so what I'm saying is, value what you have before somebody else corrupts it, commodifies it, and tries to sell it back to you as a premium. We have to start, when it comes to our own healing, when it comes to our own transformation, we have to start pulling from our own medicine bag. The stuff that we already have that has been sustaining us for generations, we need to start going back to it and valuing it. Whether or not anybody else ever tells us it's good or it's worthy or it works, we know it works because it's the only way that we survive.
Friends, we are so grateful that you would come and share space with us as you're watching us have conversation, it's no small thing whenever we actually trust each other and one another's words. This phenomenal group of women, we call ourselves GAWD, Grown Ass Women's Delegation. That's just what we call ourselves, because we are. If you need to, you can always shh on the second word, but that's perfectly fine. Over the course of the last 5 years, we have forged not only a friendship, but we have leveraged one another's power. And we found that when we got together to have conversation, oftentimes we don't want those words to fall flat, but somehow be enacted in the world, that we would actually be changed in the world. And so for you to come and to be with us and to sit with us, we consider it to be a great joy, and also a privilege that maybe there's going to be something that we say with one another that might move you or motivate you to be different in this world. And if that's the case, we will see this world change. So I'm grateful for these sisters who will be with us and holding all these words. I've got my dear friend, Reverend Dr. Donna Coltrane Battle. Put some respect on her name. Then we have Reverend Shalise Overy, Reverend Angela Whitenhill Shields, so you got to get it together, Long I, and Dr. Margaret Antoinette Brunson, who is the bishop. She doesn't want to pretend she's in ministry, but she's the bishop. Anyway, these are the folks who are going to help hold this conversation. My name is Reverend Lisa Yaboa, and I'm just grateful to share this time.
So this is a phenomenal group, as Lisa just kind of introduced, how we come together and the wisdom that we glean from one another. You know, that's part of where the mantra came from that I mentioned in the video. You know, when I said I don't need anybody to teach me, my ancestors taught me. And then I immediately thought about this group and said my friends hold the wisdom of their ancestors, because our conversations have held so much wisdom and been so rich and transformative. And so I trust that this one will be as well. So I wanted to talk about, the title is Mending from Our Own Medicine Bag. And I didn't get a chance to talk about this on the video, but I got it from a book called Of Water in the Spirit by Melodoma Patrice Sommet. And he talks about this conflict between his father and his grandfather. So his grandfather is a medicine man. His father has converted to Christianity, which his grandfather is not completely opposed to, except for the fact that Malodoma's father feels like his Christianity will not allow him to perform those traditional practices that the grandfather feels are absolutely key. And so they kind of, you know, they have this tension throughout the grandfather's life. And so on the grandfather's deathbed, he kind of makes a certain concession to his son. And he says, you know, I think it's okay for you to expose your children to this wind from the west, but he says you need to do it with caution, because his son has just wholeheartedly accepted, you know, these Western ideals and values and practices. He says you need to do it with care, but the part that stuck with me, he says, who knows, maybe tomorrow our medicine bag will be enlarged. And what I appreciated so much about that was the fact that he was open to being able to experience enhancement, to be able to learn more, but he was very clear that what he had was valuable and powerful. He's like, no, my medicine bag is good, it's solid, but you know, we can allow some investigation into this, because maybe it is something that can enhance it. And so in these times, like, you know, where my God, we need medicine, like we need a balm. And I am very suspicious of, you know, trying to get it from somebody else's medicine bag, because what I have seen is that other people are not interested in our healing. So we want to just talk about today, like how we can mend from our own medicine bag. And so I just wanted to start by asking the question, you know, I was just thinking about my own grandmother growing up, and she's meant so much to me. And as a child, so many things that she did were so strange to me. Just seemed not to make any sense. I was embarrassed by them sometimes. But I've come to value so many of them now for their power to heal and to connect with the divine as well. So I'm wondering, is there something that your grandparents, your great grandparents, maybe even your parents did, practices that they had that didn't really make sense to you at the time, or maybe were even a little embarrassing for you, but you now realize is a part of this kind of ancestral medicine bag?
I've got about 11 examples.
Go ahead and give us one or two.
So, you know, actually both of my grandmothers lived with me for some season of their lifetimes, and in my lifetime. And if I told my grandma Rose, if I told her that I was not feeling well, like if I had a stomach ache, the first thing that my grandmother was going to do was pull me close to her, and she was going to literally, like, sometimes lift up my shirt, and it didn't make a difference where we were, and she was going to place her hands on my stomach, and she was going to literally plead for me to feel healing. And, you know, at that point in time, sometimes, you know, because people's instinct now is to be like, oh, you might want to go to urgent care and get that figured out, or to go through like a long list of, what did you eat for breakfast this morning? Did you, did you have, take your Tums? You know, did you have Metamucil? The grandmother never asked me a series of those questions. I think the thing about those moments is that she actually thought she had the power to make my hurt and my injury go away. And because both my grandmothers are from Ghana, West Africa. One is from Cape Coast, the other one was from Accra. There's this thing where they would first start off by saying, sorry, sorry, sorry. And you'd be like, well, why are you sorry? But the thing, it's almost like also this empathy of like, I don't want you to be in pain, and I'm going to try to take this pain. Like, I'm going to be a co-laborer. I'm going to try to take this pain away from you. I have been manhandled many a time in my lifetime because of these grandmothers. My grandma Rose and my grandma Flora, they bruised you while they healed you.
Yeah. So I wasn't fortunate enough to know my maternal grandmother. My mom was 12 when her mother died, and then my paternal grandmother died when I was 11, and I was very young when I lost all of my grandparents. So I didn't grow up knowing my grandparents. But my mom used to do something that didn't make sense to me. And now I hear everyone talking about, you know, invoking their ancestors and, you know, listening to the ancestors. But my mom would sit kind of in a dark, quiet room, and she would talk to her mother. And, you know, growing up, it was like, whoa, mom's losing it. But as I got older and became more aware of like my own spirituality and the power of our ancestors, I realized my mom was seeking guidance in a lot of ways. You know, for her to have grown up without her mother and not having a woman present in her life, except for her grandmother, of course, that's part of this, but it's a whole nother story. I realized my mom was seeking guidance, and that's something that we also have in our medicine bag, is the wisdom of our elders, the wisdom of our ancestors, that we can go to them and we can ask questions and we can learn from their experience, so we can hear what they have to say. So that's one of the things that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it also, you know, Margaret, as you, so many things came up when you were speaking, Lisa, and you as well, Margaret. But you know, the scripture. I mean, I know we get a little scary about ancestors, like in Christianity, and yet the scriptures talked about like a great cloud of witnesses that is cheering us on. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't you think of somebody, you know, that finishes a race, or even before they begin a race, you know, they look to the stands to see the support of, you know, that family member that means so much to them to draw strength or guidance. And so, yeah, that it would be somehow taboo for us to do that, I think is something we definitely need to release.
Margaret, when you were talking, like I started thinking about this song that I grew up singing, which is Jesus on the Main Line, Tell Him What You Want. And this idea, like, yes, Jesus was sovereign, but also too, like, I could tap into speaking to Jesus, crying before Jesus, wailing before Jesus, weeping before Jesus. And when people said mainline, they didn't mean pick up a phone. I mean, this song it's this sense that like God really draws near to us, and these embodied practices that people feel like they can tap into a power that is extraordinary. Anyway, I just think there's something really beautiful about that.
So I grew up in the country, And I was raised by my parents, and I was raised by my maternal grandmother, who came to live with us when I was born. And there are two things that kind of stick out in my mind, and particularly with my grandmother. My grandmother, as I reflect back, was actually did a lot of healing through her cooking, through food, through plants, like through the earth, right? It was the earth. And so my grandmother had all these plants, and I know all of us have grandmamas at some point. This is like not something new, but my grandmother would always say, you cannot grow a plant unless you talk to a plant, unless you sing to a plant, right? Like, unless you use your voice to cultivate life. And like, started to make all these correlations as I got older, and as I moved theologically in different circles around how, you know, we have our creation story for those of us who identify as Christian, but our creation story is that, you know, all of existence, like all of life, was literally created through the voice of God. And this idea that speaking love and speaking life is what brings life. And my grandmother would have aloe plants, and she would have scriptures for when there was a burn, and scriptures for when there was this, and plants, and whenever we were sick, there were specific things that she would cook for us, or specific foods that she would cling to. And now I see my mom, like my mom is managing all of her health around her eating, and around food, and around what comes from the earth. And so that's one healing piece that I feel like was very much modeled for me growing up. And the other piece came from the broader kind of community, you know, like country Black church, you everybody's kid. Like, I still grew up in an era where you were everybody's kid. And we used to make fun of the deacons and the mothers of the church when they would get up to pray in prayer service. And when they would start to pray, they would sing their prayers. Lord, I remember when you would come down, and, you know, it was just this singing. We're like, why are they singing their prayers? Only to learn difference, that this cadence was like, it was a spiritual ritual. It was a chanting of sorts that our sister Shalise talked about in her video. It was the use of sound, you know, and how all of that is connected to the ways that people lamented and wailing and weeping through you know, shouting and screaming, that the Black church experience growing up in that became a public way of lamenting, of wailing, of releasing, so that there was enough space for praise. So there was always this ebb and flow, and how that had been modeled for centuries by our ancestors, through the use of our bodies, through the use of our voice, to publicly wail, lament, and praise.
That's powerful. I just, what you're saying triggered a conversation I was having around like worship and prayer. I'm currently worshiping in a predominantly white church, and we don't tarry. And so I've been explaining why I want to tarry, particularly right now. And it hit me that when I tarry, how I was taught in Black and brown culture is that it's almost like a portal to God. Like when you tarry, God actually shows up. You know, like you said, your grandmother, Lisa, when she prayed, she was like, I'm going to fix it. Like God is the presence in me. And so I just was struck by what you said, Donna, around like, it is an actual, you know, it's a function of our faith in that way. My grandma she's a prayer warrior. She uses patron saints. It's a part of just who we were. Even though we're Christian, we lose something, you pray to this thing, you know, so there is this kind of portal-esque. But my one is, I don't say a little less sophisticated, but my family parties, y'all. We party. And I would find myself at times like, you know, we would party for like any reason, not just for holidays. Some of the things we do, you know, we play cards, we'll make up skits. But my grandmother Flora was actually a DJ. She was Chi-Town Flo, in Southside Chicago. Chi-Town Flo, that's her name.
Like Flo?
Chi-Town Flo, y'all. She's like on the ones and twos. And my other grandma, she currently, literally, if you walk in her house, there's always a pound cake from Jewel Osco that, you know, you buy in the corner, which lemon, strawberry, one of them, chips, snacks. We play phase 10 tournaments. We have trophies. My uncle makes trophies. And if you win, you hold on to the trophy, your name's on it. They have sister parties. She has 8 siblings, 8 sisters. Every year they have a sister party. You dress up in a costume of your heritage. and they just hang out together. And even now, me and my brothers would play as adults. We play tag, or it's something about, I don't say it helps our defense mechanism, but like humor and not taking things too lightly. And I heard, you know, when the pandemic came, people like were making Rona jokes and memes and skits. And I think sometimes Eurocentric culture can deem that as like unsophisticated or ignoring or escaping, which I know we'll talk about. But there is something about the brain that has to be lighthearted. You know, the burden of God is light. And we found that in games and music and pleasure and, you know, drink and just these moments where we go to church and then you party afterwards. And so it's something that I personally enjoy. But I remember my last little story, when I was in college, I went to my grandma's for spring break, and me and my cousins were going out to the club, and we're real sophisticated Christians, you know. I was like, Grandma, I have nothing to wear. And she goes, oh, wear this, baby. Is from her Bahamas trip she took 3 years earlier, around 60. It was a midriff, literally belly out, low top. I'm like, I'm about to wear my grandma's clothes to the club. And it's like, it's seamless for us in that way. You party and you pray and you party.
I like it. I like that lifestyle. Pray and party. Pray and party.
Yes. But some people would say that the opposite of death is not simply life. The opposite of death is joy. There's something about people who can still like when the body is threatened to be like, but you will not subdue me. You will not subdue my joy. I'm for that.
I mean, and I would even take it a step further to say that in the partying, that is prayer. That just like this conversation to me is prayer, wherever, because God is always present, because God is always where we are gathered, and because God is in the life of what we do, and we're communicating and communing with God. Those are forms of prayer. It's sacred.
As one more thing, when you said it, made me think of, I'm thinking a lot about like maybe Eurocentric Christianity right now, because I'm trying to figure out where I fit. And I read a lot about Puritan culture, and Puritan culture stripped of pleasure and martyrdom and discipline, and solitude was like how you worshiped, as if you achieved holiness. And I'm like, my people, we were the opposite. So we were deemed sinfulness. But when I think about my family partying now, when you said that, I was like, it's almost like our spirituality is its own reconstructive rebellion against like that which is, you know, not holy, you know, and well, at least for us. I'm not saying it's not holy for the people, but that somehow to be pleasurable and sensual and laughing and humor in the face of being shot in the streets.
Yeah.
You know? Like there's something about that.
Yeah. Like I think we cannot we cannot ignore that, like, though we have you know, in our practice of Christianity, you know, we have strains of, you know, the faith practices of our ancestors prior to Christianity. We are the Christianity that has been handed to us is also you know, is also heavy in that puritanical tradition as well. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so then when Donna, when you were talking about, when you said that partying is prayer, I was like, oh, that's going to hit a lot of people as challenging, right? To be able to see it like that. And as everybody was talking, I was thinking about how like we have to cultivate kind of these spaces for all of these practices that we're talking about. And sometimes the culture and even the religious culture that we come up in does not even make room for that. So when Donna said partying as prayer, I was thinking of a friend of mine who's going through a very difficult situation. And many times she has said to me, but like, I know I need to pray more. Like, I know I need to get this prayer time in. And I'm like, sis, like we're doing it right now, right? And you're doing it when you cry and yell and grieve through this thing. Like you're doing it. And so what we'll do is we will busy ourselves with all the practices, these very formal practices rooted in this Puritan tradition that people tell us we have to do to be good Christians. And even though, and I'm not saying anything about like having like, you know, regular times of prayer, but we can do those things and feel so stuck in doing those things religiously that we don't really even make time for the stuff that really heals us. You know what I'm saying? Like if we don't feel like we can party because we haven't prayed enough, but partying is going to heal us, then we miss our healing.
But that is the actual argument, in my opinion, of the prodigal son, right? When the father comes out to the son who is hurt and grieved, and rightfully so, that father knows that if he does not invite this son into celebration, that's what we're talking about. If this son does not come into the celebration, that he's the one at risk of being lost. Right? That celebration is a spiritual discipline, and all disciplines are prayer, period. It's how we communicate, relate to, and be in relationship with God, our creator, the divine.
That's it.
I want to add something to what you just said, Shalise, and I want to say this for maybe people who might be watching and don't necessarily come out of a Christian tradition, or people who may come out of a Christian tradition and feel like they moved away from it for various reasons. So I'll say this about y'all, about the four of you. Y'all are probably the only Christian women that I rock with, like, wholeheartedly, you know, and could tell you just about everything that I'm into. Because what I also recognize is that for most of the super Christians, or people who have been formed in the Christian tradition, Christianity also did not teach us much about who we are in the context of the world around us, right? Like, so much of how we were shaped, or how people are shaped in Christianity, is in the context of our faith. But to be Black in America holds its own context. And so we have to locate ourselves as Christian people, or Black people, Black women in particular. We have to locate ourselves in lots of different spaces. We have to locate ourselves in the church. We have to locate ourselves in the world. And so because of that, we take on the identity of a Christian, but then we forsake the rest of ourselves, because we can't always, it's very difficult to try to navigate all of these different spaces. So you just kind of choose one and you say, if I'm going to be a Christian, then that's what that means. This is what that means for me to be a Christian. And so I think what you're saying, Shalise, too, is that people often hunker down in these formal practices because they don't know what else to do. They often don't know what resonates with them spiritually. So, for example, one of the things that I do that grounds me more than anything else, more than opening my mouth for prayer, to pray, more than, you know, formally kind of sitting and meditating, is going outside and putting my feet in the dirt. But if you think about it, I've been to lots of funerals, right? And what do y'all say over the grave? You say, what is it?
Ashes
From
to ashes,
ashes to
dust
ashes,
to dust.
dust to dust. So we are returning back to the earth, but we are part of the earth. And so we feel all over the place. We don't feel grounded at times. To ground ourselves back to the thing that we came from, you know, the actual substance of the earth, makes a whole lot of sense to me. But that's not something that, you know, we necessarily teach people to do within the realm of like Christianity. So I think part of it too is locating yourself, like allowing your spirit, the spirit of God within you, to locate you within an identity and the practices that are going to help shape your identity. And being a Christian is part of that, but it's not the only part of that. And I think we need to do more exploration as Black people, especially as Black women, to say, what is my identity? And what are the things that are going to help shape and help me heal, so that I'm not also in an identity crisis when I'm trying to heal my heart and heal my spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
Bishop always got something.
Right.
Stop.
Well, but I think what you name is like identity is like, oh, if you were raised in a Christian society, which if you're in America, you were Judeo-Christian, right? Your identity was told to you. In whatever scale, whatever your body looked like, what your sexuality was, all these parts of your social identity, wherever you fit in, you picked up what the identity was told to you. And so what I love what you're saying is like, you can choose your identity. Like you can actually say no, that I'm going to be Christian, but I might still have, my rocks, I might still wear a midriff. I might, I celebrate summer solstice, y'all. It's coming up, June. Like there are things that I will do because my identity is chosen from me, and the spirit that flows within me is congruent. It's rightly, divided in that way. And I just think about like, holiness through Puritan ethic was to do certain disciplines. But you hear a lot about holiness as being whole, like your identity actually being fully present, outside, inside at the same time. Right?
And how that is a witness, that whole reality is a witness. Like I often say that Christianity best describes my faith, but it's not the totality of my faith. And how that becomes a witness that the divine is not bound by our religious boundaries. Like the God that we serve is not bound by Christianity. So why should I be?
Exactly. Yes. Go.
There was something that Shalice said that Margaret touched on, that Angela added on, and then Donna put the thing that made me think about how a lot of these like words that we use in our, whether it be like if you're theologically trained or you're trying to keep yourself aware of like, spiritual or therapeutic practices, we have all these like words that feel very much like they bind us. So we say things like, oh, you're classically trained. So then it's like, well, anything that's other than whatever being classically trained is like a subset, exotic, a caveat, a footnote. And I think like, talking about identity, when I can say that my grandmother placing her hand on my stomach is a form of healing, hard stop, not, oh, it's an exotic form of healing. It's it is just as much. So I don't, that is classical. What my grandmother did was
That's right. That's right.
And for me, or the fact that at, Ghanaian funerals, we dance hardcore. And it's not like all of a sudden that we are doing whiplash. It's like we can hold joy and sorrow beautifully. I think we have something to share to the world for those who kind of hold it in their bodies. This is what it means for me to be classically trained, to tarry, to moan, to rock, to walk, pace my house, and just to like cry out. It's not an other. No. It is. For me, it is. Now people have preferences. Although I would even say that I think sometimes people have particular preferences because they've been told that's what you should prefer, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, I would love to continue a little bit on that, but I want to ask y'all something else, and it ties back to like what Margaret said. The conversation Margaret started about identity. I want to know, what has been your experience when you have refused, to kind of, like Margaret said, you feel like you have to choose one, right? When you refuse to just fit this mold of this Christian identity that might have been mediated to you by your Christian community. Like what has been your experience, right? When you have chosen not to do that, or some of these practices that you mentioned, is it something that's kind of been underground for you, that you just didn't you didn't tell anybody about, but just kept going to the prayer meeting or whatever, like you were supposed to, and was like, when I get home, I'm gonna take my shoes off and stand outside on the ground? What has that experience been like for you?
Well, I know for me, at first, I think because of the environment I was in, and maybe some people who were around me that didn't quite understand it, of course it was questioned. But I think the more I've realized that the more that I walk in my purpose, God begins to align me with the people who, one, will accept me and love me for who I am, but who also are like-minded, right? So I don't really have a lot of people in my life that I'm closely connected to, who are not at least open to the spirit, like, and open to what open to understanding whatever the Spirit is doing in a moment within them, within other people. And so that causes them not to judge me for what I believe will work for me. And even if they say, I don't know, that's a little bit much, I don't know about that. There are a couple of people who have found themselves out in fields with me with their shoes off, standing in the dirt. Because I think that's just because, you know, I led them to that. I led them to the ground. But yeah, so for me, it's been, I've been met with mostly positivity in my journey, in my spiritual journey. And I think God continues to bring people into my life who are adding to that journey and who I can also add to their journey.
Yeah, I was just thinking about a young woman who not too long ago, before the Rona hit, had asked me to dedicate her house, and she's like, I've been in it for a couple of years, but you know, like I just want to. I want to kind of like start fresh. You know, it's been some trauma. I never really, you know, dedicated it, and I want to start fresh. And so I'm trying to make it like, I'm always trying to like ask the questions, even, you know, as a spiritual leader, right? Instead of just doing kind of a set of things like that you always do in certain circumstances, like what is meaningful to you? What do you want to accomplish? This, that, and the other. So like, as we're talking about that, you know, it seemed like we were done, and like at the very end, you could hear with like so much hesitancy. She was like, my friend was wondering if she could burn some sage. Like, I don't know.
I knew it.
I don't know if that would be okay. And I was like, sure, yeah, we'll make it work. So I get there, and this beautiful thing happens, and she introduces me to her friend, and I said, well, look, I'm just going to go to every space, like, and say a blessing that, like, you know, reflects the purpose of that space. And she said, and I'm gonna be your acolyte. And what happened in that space was so, I mean, it was so organic, so perfect, so like seamless, just because of the openness that, you know, we both had to know that the Spirit can work in this way.
Yeah, one of the things Donna has said, I think Donna and I have had conversations about just the idea of being mystics and, you know, leaving space for the mystery of God. And that just kind of stays with me, because especially when we're talking about healing, I don't know how you can desire healing and to be whole without accepting the mystery of God, because healing shows up in lots of different ways. And if we think that we can figure out how we're going to be healed, or that we can think our way into healing, I think, like you said, Shalise, earlier, we miss it. We miss opportunities for healing, and God is showing up all the time. And because we're not attentive and open to the Spirit, we totally miss opportunities. And so I think even putting in your medicine bag a posture towards like being open, like how do we even cultivate like a posture of openness to the Spirit? Because sometimes we don't know what's in the medicine bag. We don't even know what to pull out. But even paying attention to how God might drop something in there one day, and you're like, what's this? This is a new thing, right? So like, yeah, it just made me think about that there's a posture that we have to take to be open to healing.
This is something, it may or may not be for someone, but I've been thinking about Bible study in the book. Gospel of Mark is very different than the other Gospels. Gospel of Mark he's a different energy, which I love his energy. And when the moment where Jesus, for those of you who are church kids, where Jesus is like, who do you guys say I am? He's talking to the disciples. Who has people said I am? And they're like, well, some people say you're Elijah, and some people say you're John the Baptist. And all my activists are like, you know, were you that activist? Are you this activist? Whose movement is this, right? Like, what camp are you in, essentially? And they say all these different people. And then Peter says, well, you're the Messiah. And Jesus says, don't tell anybody. He never said yes. He never said yes to any of them. He never said, yes, I'm Messiah. Yes, I'm Elijah. He just said, don't say nothing. So in my mind, I'm like, he could be all three. Like there are spirituality, or what is, could actually be open, way more open, because he never affirms like, you were right, Peter, you were wrong, you know, and other gospels say different interpretations around it that people interpret differently. But that has helped me be much more open to other spiritualities, because it was kind of like all of that. Sure, just don't tell people.
No, but I think that that's powerful, you know, in the way that, like, as you were talking, Angela, what came to me was that, you know, this understanding that God is love, or the divine is love, but that love is a verb. And so we, you know, we're talking about this dichotomy and this paradox between a noun and a verb, right? And how we intertwined with the identity and our understanding of who God is so limited, but also, so it's like we know God, but we don't know God. Right? God is, but God isn't. God will be, but God won't, right? It's all of those things, and it's living in that. So I think that that also speaks to what Margaret was kind of touching on, is that, and I think that that's at the core of what it means to grow spiritually and emotionally, to mature, is to accept what we cannot control, but to also accept that God is God, and that we are constantly in a position of receiving, of interacting, and that we're okay in that dance, like becoming okay in that dance, but also having enough security and enough attachment to God, or to the divine as we understand God to be, to move honestly in that, you know, that we don't have to hold stuff back, that I can move honestly, knowing that there's very little that I know, but that I don't have to let go of what I do.
That's right. Because ultimately, you know, and I know we have to wrap up, but ultimately, you know, when we look at the word spirituality and what it really means, it really boils down to, like, what is the work of making meaning out of your life? So how do we make meaning? How do we find purpose in life, even in this human experience? Like, we are spiritual beings. And so ultimately it's like, how is God making meaning of your life? And that could be lots of different things, you know, to different people. So
I wanted to ask this final question, and that is, what are you pulling on right now from that medicine bag? What is helping you to make it through this moment? What is helping you to continue toward wholeness? And then maybe this also came to me. Do we have the luxury to focus on healing as individuals when we see so much brokenness in our world?
Do we have the luxury? I would say it's imperative, right? So I've been doing some work with some folk around spiritual care, and I often quote the great wisdom of Audre Lorde, which is, you know, self-care is more than just self-preservation for us. It is an act of political warfare. You know, so this understanding that in a world and in a system, in a society that has as a goal to tear you down and to keep you underneath, one of the greatest forms of resistance that we can possibly have is to not just survive, right? To move past the I'm just going to do everything I can to get over, but to actually thrive, is to actually be more than conquerors, right? So we can conquer, but then we can be more. And that, you know, when it comes back to it, if we're talking about identity, if we're talking about who God has created us to be and who the divine wants us to be, that is life, and that is love, and that is joy. And am I in a position to say, no, God, you're not right. I don't need love right now. I don't need joy. We're in a position to say, no, God, I think you're wrong about that. Like, I'm not worthy of this. I don't need this. You know,
Don't need rest.
That's right. And I think that that's where we come back to, again, the distinction between what's God's work and what's our work. We work, but we cannot move into the realm of God, because then we are entering into spaces that white supremacy has taught us to move into, self-idolatry. So when we start to feel like we can save it all on our own, and we don't need to take a rest as God has told us. We're saying we can be God, and that may be inadvertent, like it may not be conscious for us, but we are living in a self-idolatrous society, and that produces a thought pattern and practices and behavior of self-idolatry, even if it is tempered under martyrdom. So no, I think we can't afford it.
No, with 3 exclamation marks. No.
It's real.
Lord have mercy. What's in my, go ahead, Angela. Go ahead.
You
You go.
Okay.
Similarly, I'm a therapist by trade, and we do a lot around emotional work. And right now I have been hella emotional, y'all. And it's been amazing. I will scream, I will make love, I will laugh, I will curse. Like, it happens seamlessly, and it feels like God, right? It feels good to just be expressive. And we've been taught to be polite and talk around something and, wait your turn. And right now it's just been good to just be very emotional. And sometimes when people are emotional and I'm not, I don't fake it. I don't cry because everybody else cries. I'm just like, I'm good. Yeah, I'm chilling, kick back, party if I need to. That has been new, and that has been weird, and it has felt great. The last thing I'll say out of that, because I've been angry, because I've been writing, I get angry, then I write, or I'm sad, then I dance. My brother said to me, he goes, creativity comes out of constraint. And I think about my people, and we would, we Jimmy rig everything. My dad be making stuff out of stuff that shouldn't be made out of stuff. And there's something about that brilliance and that uniqueness that is God to me. I think about James Cone talking about God is God, the God of the oppressed, that God's presence dwells with the marginalized people. God loves all people, but when somebody is sick from oppression, you can feel God's presence with them. And that comes in creativity form. Like when you don't have stuff, you make stuff. And that making stuff, that innovation has been life. It is the Pentecost life for me right now, just creating things out of my anger that I think will actually be like, it will help move us forward. But right now it's just for me, it's just an outlet, and to be able to sit, that it's just an outlet, and stay creative and stay angry and, laughing at the same time. It's been cool and crazy.
Margaret?
So what's in my bag right now? A few things I just want to highlight. So, one, I've been leaning heavily into self-care, taking care of my body, eating clean food, whole foods, plant-based foods, real food, movement. But I think another thing that I'm actually seeing as like a wellness or healing sort of strategy is like stepping into place. I think there's a moment, we're in a time, and there's a lot of angst that happens when we know we should be doing a thing. I'm going to speak for myself. When I know I should be doing a thing that I'm not doing, and there's turmoil, inner turmoil. And so really just following the leading of the Spirit. When the Spirit says write, I'm writing. When the Spirit says, shoot the breeze with Lisa, I'm shooting the breeze with Lisa. Like, I'm stepping into place and doing the things that I feel led to do. And to me, that feels very healing. It feels like healing. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me right now, one of the things that feels important is to, it's just cultivate space to hear if I need to. I'm not usually very strict on that, because I just believe, I tend to believe that as long as I'm not extremely distracted, like God knows how to get my attention. But one of the things I've been doing, I pulled from my grandmother's bag. Like, my grandmother used to sing all the time, like sing or hum. I mean, it didn't matter if she was in her kitchen or like the grocery store. It didn't matter. And so I've been just using that as an intentional practice in a time set aside. And I've noticed that it gives me an opportunity to grieve when I need to, because sometimes, like, you just you're moving into what needs to be done, and you haven't actually taken a moment for lament. So the other day I just started humming "Come Ye Disconsolate," and
English. Mm.
yeah, and it really became a portal for my grief. And also just the vibration. Sometimes it moves into chanting as a way that can settle me, but settling also means and not just settled for that moment, right? Like settled so you can always kind of tap into a place where you can kind of hear and so that you can keep in step with the spirit. And that's been something I've been using. It's been working well.
Mm.
You all will, for those of you who are watching, you're going to figure out very quickly that I'm one of those people who everything in my life, there's like 50-11. Like I just, coming out of the Christian tradition, one of my favorite passages of scripture is Jesus saying, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come that you may have life and life more abundantly. And I'm like, ooh, the life more abundantly part. Like, that's just how I live. Everything can be a thing. And I think in regard to like healing, what's in my bag, my medicine bag, everything. I too have been like leaning into the songs of, I call them the church mothers, the older women who really did love me whole when I was growing up. And so whether it's, about going into a prayer room and Jesus writing up prescriptions, or this joy that I have, the world can't take it from me, or I don't feel no ways tired. I think, oh, when that song bubbles up, okay, maybe this is how God wants me to bump into healing. I have held a couple of babies during this time as we're coming out of quarantine. Every time I hold a baby, I think about how the babbling of babes is like a strong tower. Like maybe this is going to be the moment I'll feel something. Margaret talked about, chopping it up. But like if I see her face pop up on Marco Polo, maybe she's the face of the divine to remind me that I'm not alone. I've worked out in this season, like moving my body. Whether that's to Ninth Wonders, IG Live parties, and I'm like, I'll be up 1 o'clock in the morning in the Fast Auntie Lounge, like, cause Yet Shall I Live. If Yet Shall I Live was a person, that's what I'm.
Shout out.
That is you.
And also like many of you have said, like eating nourishing food. Like I make a lot of gestations. I just want to savor, like God is feeding me, and so. Right now, it's like I don't have to go to urgent care. I don't have to be sitting in a church sanctuary. God is like literally just saying anything. I can make this extraordinary to heal you. That's how I'm just seeing things right now.
So I'll just be quick. I ditto everything my sisters have said. Like for me, it's like a friend of mine says, I have to be like Jazz. So whatever I need on this day is what I do. I do a lot of bodily work. So a lot of my work is not because I'm such an intellectual person in the work I have to do. A lot of my practices are not intellectual. They are very much bodily. And the only other thing that I will add is that I feel like being present, because I'm also a mother, I have 3 kids, that in this moment, I can be right here, right now. Like I don't have to hold the grief that I haven't fully healed from yesterday. In this moment, I can hold whatever grief is coming up in me now and just deal with that. Knowing that I will have time as God progresses me to deal with whatever comes up in the next moment. So, the worries of tomorrow are in tomorrow. And I can be present with whatever is coming up with me now as I work out, tend to my kids, cook, whatever it is. So yeah.
Amen. Ashe. Y'all are amazing. My friends hold the wisdom of their ancestors, and it is rich. You all who are watching are amazing. We hope that you have gleaned something valuable from this talk with God. We have some challenges for you as far as practices are concerned, and we'll make sure that we connect you to those. But it's been wonderful sharing this time together. Many blessings, y'all.